Have my mic on. Call this meeting of the Hamilton City School Board of Education to order. First that we need is to appoint Treasurer Pro Tem. Mr. Frazier is out ill, so I'd like to make a motion to nominate.
Rich Natiello.
Thank you, Mr.
I make the motion.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I knew I was going to mess that up. Mr. Nadiala, would you please call the roll? Yes.
Mr. David,
Yes.
Dr. Copus,
Yes.
Ms. Matthews,
Yes.
and Mr. Sprague is out.
And I'd move to excuse Mr. Sprague.
Yep. Thank you. And now, Mr. Nadiala, would you please call the roll? Here.
Dr. Copus,
Here.
Mr. Davidson,
Here.
Mrs. Matthews,
Here.
Mr. Sprague is
Mr.
absent.
Sprague absent.
Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, I hope that everybody had time to read the minutes from previous meetings. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Rich?
Dr. Copus,
Yes.
Mrs. Matthews,
Yes.
Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Davidson.
Yes.
And then next on the agenda, I believe Mrs. Blevins is going to fill us in on our district report card results.
Yeah, so thank you, President Baker and board. I'm playing dual role a little bit here this evening. As you each know, Mr. Holbrook as well as Mr. Wright are out sick. We're going to share with you a draft of our most recent report card. These are expected to be released across the state tomorrow, so you will see a lot coming out about our report card. I still technically have to call this a draft, but again, it will be finalized tomorrow morning, so I do not anticipate much change from what you'll see. Just have our vision here. There's a little bit of a delay. I just want to remind the board that last year, in June of 21, they approved a new rating system to the report cards, and that took effect last school year. And so the most notable differences of that is we went from having letter grades of A through F to star ratings. So instead of an A through F rating, we now have 1 to 5 stars. The way that these are characterized are what you see up here on the screen. If a school district is meeting or a building is meeting state standards, that is considered a 3-star, and then up or down from there, okay? So you can kind of see where the state is now landed. These are the components that go into our report card rating. So we get a grade in each of these areas, or a star rating in each of these areas. One is achievement, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. One is progress, or as we talk all the time, growth. The next one is gap closing. How is our achievement and growth in our identified subgroups? And we'll talk a little bit about that. Our graduation rate, what percentage of our students are walking across that stage in 4 years and in 5 years? And then early literacy. How are our youngest learners doing at the fundamentals of reading, of ensuring that they are on track as they hit those intermediate grades? This is our draft of our report card for the 23-24 school year. Our overall district rating is a 3.5-star district rating. You will see that is the same here in a minute as it was last year, though there are marked improvements in our component ratings. So we'll talk through that here in a bit. But our overall district rating for this year will be a 3.5 stars, just as it was last year. Our achievement for this year is a 3-star. Our progress, which is our growth, is a 4-star. Gap closing was a 4. Graduation rate was a 2. Previously, that was a 1, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. And our early literacy went from a 1 to now a 2 this year. So we are seeing positive gains as we go through here. We are not going to go through the buildings this evening just because those are not finalized yet. So I will come back and share those with you as soon as those are finalized for you. What goes into our achievement each of these measures. For our achievement piece, it's all based on performance index. Like I mentioned before, we are at a 3-star, which is a proficient rating in the eyes of the state. And what that looks at is how many students are scoring in 5 different levels. So everything from the advanced level, the highest you can score on a test, all the way down to our limited, which is our lowest level. This is what the old state test that used to measure kind of proficiency. If you remember the old proficiency test, this is where this comes from. Questions that we kind of look at as we are analyzing our report card right now is, are students improving? What we like to see is it isn't just how many kids are at the top. Are we seeing kids with upward momentum from the limited category to the basic to proficient? So we really look at that to make sure that we're seeing upward movement so that we can address. Something that's sometimes lost in that is we can have students that are in a limited range that grow 25 points and are still in the same category. So it isn't always about category. Sometimes it's where are they starting and are we seeing that growth, which is what really in our district we talk and focus a lot on. The second element is our progress. This is our bread and butter. This is what I believe in, which is our growth, is are we growing our students? All students deserve one lap around a track. If we were just simply keeping kids, if a kid came in that was on grade level, if we were just keeping them on grade level, growing them 1 year, then our rating would be a 3, because that would mean we're making adequate progress as a district. If you can see off of this measure, we are exceeding as a district a year's worth of growth. So we are actually closing in on or lapping more than just 1 year's of progress. So it's really helpful with our students that are behind, because they need to close those gaps in order to catch up. Here's just kind of how the stars break down. I just kind of talked through that, but the 3 stars show that we've met the growth expectations. 4s, a 4-star means we have significant evidence that we have exceeded that, and then obviously a 5 is just at that larger magnitude. That is all of our students put into one bucket. How is the progress? Questions that we ask ourselves is, are they growing? Who's growing, who's not? What we have learned statistically is a student can rebound if they have not grown in 1 year's time. However, students that year after year are not making adequate progress, they have a really hard time catching up. So one of our pieces that we look at isn't just who's growing, but instead who isn't. What worked for them? What do we need to change? We do that all throughout the year, but it's really important to us that if a student has not grown, we've got to close that gap the following year. We have to make up that ground, so we're never keeping our kids behind. The next component is gap closing. Gap closing is we were talking with President Baker earlier this week about this measure. It has a lot of different components in it. Gap closing is an interesting one because it looks at everything. It looks at how do our gifted students do? Are they achieving and growing? So you get points for each of those. It looks at our population of students who are considered chronic absenteeism. So students that miss over 15 days in a school year. Are they growing? Statistically, typically they are not. However, if we as a district are reducing the percentage of kids that fall into that category, we're making adequate progress. In order to do that, that's a 2% decrease that you have to hit each year. I am very proud of our team to say that we are reducing our chronic absenteeism year after year. We've been able to reduce that. In addition, we have our EL proficiency. We talk a lot about our newcomers, our ESL students, and their proficiency of the English language and our academic standards. We get rated on what's their proficiency look like. Again, the growth component as well as the achievement. Also, our graduation goals. How are all of our different students approaching graduation? So for instance, we look at, what percentages are African Americans graduating out of that cohort. We also look at how does our math and ELA achievement look by subgroup? So our ELL students, our students with disabilities, are we seeing gains in their overall achievements? They look at the same thing on growth. So I say this measure to me is a little bit of the kitchen sink because it throws it all in and gives you point values. A lot of people have asked me what's really different about this component than the other ones. Each subgroup is rated equally in this particular component. So even though we might have 500 students that fall under a white class versus we have 50 students in our African American class, they are weighted equally in this component. And what that means is they're saying each of your subgroups should be growing both achievement and progress. So in the eyes of the state, I'm very proud of this because we are exceeding expectation with closing the gap with every single one of our learners.
Great.
Just for a point of comparison, here are all of our, they're now calling them student groups, but they were previously called subgroups. These are all of our different subgroups that we have here in Hamilton City Schools. So in order to have a student group, you have to have 15 kids that fall or identify within that particular category. If you look at these, they're not all the same. They're not all just based on ethnicity. Some of them are economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, English language learner. We have many kids that fall into multiple buckets on this particular measure. So one kid might hit you in 3 or 4 places. So when we talk about pushing everyone forward equally, it's really important because we have many kids that might fall into multiple buckets. Any questions so far? I know we've talked about report cards before. I just want to make sure. This is kind of just how the state determines the stars of what you get with there. Again, a 4-star, which I'm proud to say that we have, exceeds our state standards in closing those educational gaps. Questions that we look at, what is the connection? We know there's a connection that when kids come to school consistently, they do better academically. So if we're seeing that there's an increase in chronic absenteeism, well, most likely our achievement's going to go down. So instead, by reducing that chronic absenteeism, we're hopefully raising achievement and progress.
Just out of curiosity, what are you doing to get the?
We're doing a lot of different things. One of the things that the state has required is these new attendance intervention teams, where if a student is flagged for a certain number of days before they get to the 15, we're bringing in parents to have a problem-solving meeting. It's not a, point your finger and say, you got to do better. It's what are the barriers that are preventing them from getting to school? They make a plan. We build in incentives, little things, especially with our younger learners, to try to get them there. We want to work with our community agencies. If transportation is a barrier, how can we help fix that particular piece? If it's childcare, how can we help remove those barriers? Because we know when kids are here, they're going to grow and be on track.
Mrs. Blevins, our best estimate, what is our chronic absenteeism rate?
I can pull that up here in just 1 minute. We're about 22%. The state average, and that varies by building. So just know that we're about that piece. The state average would like to see everyone at 18.1 or less. So we are working towards that level. It varies. If you go back and look at our COVID year, obviously it was sky high because when you think about our quarantine and things like that, we are getting back on track with that. And I will show you, I do want to show you how you'll be able to pull up the report cards so that you can go and look at those, and I will share those with you when they come out tomorrow.
And how many days is it classified chronic?
15 days.
Do specific grade levels suffer more than others with chronic absenteeism?
I used to think yes, but what I've learned is really not. Before, a lot of people, I think there's a misconception that our older students tend to miss more because the education is on their own. What I found in many cases, actually some of our elementary kids miss quite a few days, not at their own accord. They're at the mercy of whether they have a family member or a relative that can get them to and from school. So we see some fluctuation with that, but I will tell you the long ago belief that it was more secondary than elementary, I do not see in our numbers as much as I used to. The next component that we have on here is early literacy. 3 pieces go into early literacy, and this is kind of replaced the old 3rd grade guarantee. So in early literacy, the first one is that what I consider the stronghold from the 3rd grade guarantee is just what is your straight proficiency rate of 3rd grade reading? How many kids in 3rd grade were proficient on the state assessment that they take in the spring? They get multiple times, but they have to at some point throughout their 3rd grade year pass the state test or our diagnostic map assessment that we give. So we get a percentage points for how many of our 3rd graders actually meet that threshold. The second one is our promotion to 4th grade. So we have many students that are, whether they're a student with disability or there are, like I mentioned, passing our MAP test or other measures in the district that can meet third grade to be promoted to fourth grade, but do not pass the state test. So typically, our promotion to fourth grade is much higher. We do not believe that retention is necessarily the way to solve this problem. Instead, we like to provide very in-depth and intensive intervention for kids, and we found great success in that. But the promotion to fourth grade is just a straight percent of how many of your third graders are going on to fourth grade the following year.
Third grade guarantee before dictated that they had to be.
Before, it no longer does. It is now a team decision, including parents at the table. We see less and less parents that want to see them retained as long as they are getting that intensive intervention. And we've seen much more success with that. That helps with the maturity of students, with the confidence of students. And we see actually higher graduation rates by continuing them on into fourth grade rather than the retention.
Percentage are being retained.
Very low. You could count on two hands how many students we retained in third grade this year. Yes. And again, most of those were at parent request, not necessarily district requirement. And then the third one is just our improving K-3 literacy. So one thing that the state has gotten smart on, and I think districts have responded well to this, is waiting until third grade to find out if a kid is on track or not is too late. So we start tracking in kindergarten whether a student is proficient or on track in order to pass that third grade reading guarantee. That's where that came from. For students that are scoring below those benchmark scores, we put them on something that's called a RIMP. It's a reading improvement plan that we monitor. And we, all throughout the year, will provide intervention to kids. That last rating is, what is your success at a kid who starts kindergarten or starts a grade level on a RIMP that gets off and is now successful? So it's your rate of taking kids from off track to on track. So those three components come together to give us our rating. I will tell you, as these have changed, this has been one. Last year we had a 1 in this score that was very common across the area, but none of us were happy about that particular piece. I am glad to see that we are seeing upward movement in this, of taking this to a 2, but there's still a lot of work to be done here. We've got to catch up our kids and make sure that they are proficient at reading when they're leaving third grade. We know if a student leaves third grade with the ability to read, that unlocks 75% of the text that they will see throughout the rest of their high school experience.
Was there any specific category that got them up to the 2? I mean, that we did better in?
We did better in all three of those categories. I will tell you, we did reduce our number of retentions of the promotion to fourth grade, so that actually boosted our score a little bit. We had about 98% of our third to fourth graders be promoted, whereas in previous years that was a little lower. And so that helped a little bit. Our proficiency went up, and then our number of students that are coming off of RIMPs decreased, which helps us.
Things are we doing to get that number?
Well, we've changed over our, great questions, Mr. Davidson. We've changed over our curriculum. As you know, in the state of Ohio, there's been a big push and a requirement to shift all curricular instruction to the science of reading. And so we had already started that shift last year, but we have fully embedded that. One of the things that we brought back, and I've heard from many parents how happy they are, is phonics-based instruction. We actually, if you remember last year, we talked with you guys about the Really Great Reading program that was teaching kids. I talk all the time, words are no different than math. It's a combination. You put this together plus this, and it equals meaning. And so we have really, really trained our teachers and provided robust curriculum around the science of reading to help these kids leave with fundamentals. You can see a shift even in our teachers. Teachers that grew up in the 90s, that was when the pendulum in education kind of shifted from phonics-based instruction to whole language learning. So you have these students or even adults that struggle to break down words because they memorized them, right? It was sight word lists. So instead, we're really getting back to breaking words down into their smaller units that make meaning. And we're seeing students really grasp onto this. Yeah. But this is still a year. I will tell you, a year from now, this will be higher.
Yeah.
Because I am committed to making sure that we are pushing this. This is building the foundation of our entire school system. If our primary instruction is not strong and our students are not set for success, that's just going to carry through the rest of our school experience.
I've read some articles, if you don't have them by third grade, proficient in reading, you're going to lose.
Correct, which is why I really like that last measure that they've added, the improving K-3 literacy, because waiting to measure it in third grade is too late. We have to be looking at that in kindergarten and first grade and second grade. We've also added this year in what we're calling an AIM block, which is an enrichment and intervention block to help students with extra reading support throughout the school day, not only to just remediate, but also to enrich through vocabulary, through hands-on activities, because what we found is kids don't want to do things they always aren't good at. How can we accentuate their strengths? So we're hopeful that this is going to take hold. How the whole rating kind of goes through. Questions that we asked, we talked through this quite a bit. Graduation rate. Graduation rate is measured on two pieces. The first one is our 4-year. So what that looks at is any student that enters our freshman, or that enters our district in their freshman year is entered into what we call a cohort. They track that group of students from the time they're a freshman all the way through their graduation. Okay? Now, if we get a student later on, they're added to that cohort. But they have to be with us in that high school experience. And they measure what is our success at getting them to graduation in a 4-year term and then in a 5-year timeline.
So in essence, you would could have a student that's coming from another district that they were not as strong in primary, the elementary education, and then we just get, I don't want to say stuck with it, but we're responsible for making sure they graduate.
We often, if Mr. Zeri and Mr. Smallwood would tell you, we have students that come a lot of times to our high schools that are credit deficient from others. When you look at our Hamilton High, as well as our cohort of kids who have been in Hamilton consistently from the time they were in kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, it's 100%. We have much success with the kids that stay with us through the system. It's our transientness that comes in and out where they're credit deficient. We do everything. They do a great job to set them up for success. Still, we never give up on getting them across that stage, but those two measures come together.
I'm a little confused. I'm
Yeah.
sure some people are going to confuse when they hear that or see that. We're so proud of our 6% graduation rate.
So this is, good question. So this is district graduation rate. So the 98% that we discussed, that's our Hamilton High graduation rate. That is still there. If you remember, we have 2 high schools that feed into this graduation rate. One is Hamilton High, and the other is our Miami School, which is our alternative credit recovery high school. Typically for students that are credit deficient or traditional school is not working for them, they go there. So when I talk about our students that are consistently our students from start to finish, we do a great job of getting them across that graduation stage.
So when we see the report card for the individual schools, the high
Correct.
school will
The
show-
high school will see, the high school, and I can tell you this because that gets calculated a year ahead. Their graduation rate is a 5.
Okay.
The highest it can be.
Mrs. Blevins, am I correct in thinking the state has recently changed the law as to how we calculate our graduation?
Yes, with
rates?
the 2 different measures that go into it, absolutely. In addition, it's hard for us at times because we do have some of our students with disabilities that we offer extended education for as part of a federal grant that's held against us. If they don't graduate in 4 years, that's a ding, if you will.
Yeah.
We're still going to do it because it's what's right by kids. At the end of the day, it's about kids. Yes, we want to show growth and success, but again, these are some of these new parameters that we're working underneath.
Yes.
I also do want to commend Mr. Zeri and Mr. Smallwood of really trying to think outside the box of helping kids meet graduation requirements through alternative pathways. So you can meet graduation requirements through state assessments. There's all kinds of different measures. You can also do them through co-ops, our work that we're doing with Mr. Cannell on getting with Big Blue Works and getting students connected with those opportunities. We're working with Butler Tech on doing Rise Up credentialing program in the hospitality field. There's lots of different ways that we are exploring to help kids meet this requirement. So I do believe as a district, it will continue to grow.
Well, I mean, yeah, at the high school, I mean, Mr. Zari's doing that, and that's
Yep.
why he has a 5.
Yeah.
What are we doing to get the Miami school up?
Great question. So one of the things we've kind of redesigned the Miami School over the last number of years. We have partnered with Marshall High School as well for students that, we have limitations on what we can do within the traditional school setting. And so a trade school, we can't offer the same opportunities that they do. So we have embraced them as a partner. Many public schools do not embrace some of these private charter schools to be a partner, but it really helps us to get the kids beyond the diploma, right? An opportunity to work, a future. In addition, Mrs. Lynch, who is now over at the Miami School back at Ross Avenue building, is doing a great job of trying to attack why was the student not successful. Putting them in an online program isn't always going to help students get through the content because they have to be self-motivated. So how are we providing some of that social emotional learning? How are we providing counseling for them, tutoring, trying to fill those gaps? Some of those kids still lack some of the fundamental reading skills that we were talking about in the early literacy piece. How can we use our programs and our knowledge of what we're doing with the elementary to fill those gaps? So I do think we are really on the right track of addressing it instead of just moving it to a different building. So again, our overall rating was a 3.5 out of 5 stars for the 23-24 school year. I do want to just put this comparison up side by side. This shows us over time of what our report cards have been. So obviously you have the A through F system all the way through 18-19. If you remember, there's no report card in those in-between years because of the ugly C word called COVID. But you can see that in the first year of the stars last year of where our report card was, and then this year. So while the overall rating has stayed the same, you can see some marked improvements in those graduation rates overall, as well as in our early literacy.
And you can also kind of, the stars compared to the
Yeah, you
letter
collate
grades, you
them a
can
little bit.
kind of,
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny, I was talking with my husband a little bit about the report card, and we've been waiting for it to come out, and what does that look like? There was some talk it was gonna come out today, then it was delayed till tomorrow. And he said, well, how do you feel about it? And I said, I feel really good that, in essence, we do not have an F or a 1 on a report card. I would like for this report card that you're seeing this year to become the foundation, the floor, not the ceiling. We have so much more we can do. We've just scratched the surface. But I do want to commend our administrators, our teachers, our students, our families for wrapping their arms around our district to help us get to where we are today.
good stuff. And then when you get the report card tomorrow, then that's where you can do the comparison of the other districts to us and, okay.
We
Yes.
even had the individual buildings.
I should have those tomorrow as well.
Do you anticipate any 5s this year?
I don't anticipate any 5s this year. I do anticipate some growth. We've got some buildings that are really coming on and growing. I see many buildings that stayed the same but have incremental changes like what you've seen in the district data. Understand those range of those stars is quite large. So to move one indicator might not move you a whole star rating. So we are actually doing data dives next week with all of our principals and our instructional coaches on Tuesday with the elementary and Thursday with our secondary to really look at this to make sure that our administrators understand and then kind of game plan. What's the next step based on the data? I don't want to wait until next year to find out where do we go. How do we use this information to be productive to plan for the 24-25 school year? Any questions?
Well, it's good stuff.
Okay.
Really, congratulations to everybody on that we,
It's been a labor of love, and I want to put that all back to our teachers and our administrators who are working hard and
Yep.
focused. We talk a lot in our district about making sure our arrows are all aligned going in the same direction, and you're seeing that movement on the report card.
Yeah.
You get a powerful group of people in a room, and anything is possible.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
I'm sure your goal for next year is to be at a 4.
oh, yes, it is. And don't think that's the ceiling either. I want to go much higher than that, but we've got some tangible ideas to get us there, so I'm eager to see what we can do.
Sounds great. Thank you, Andrea. I believe next on anything else? Next on the agenda, Rich, I think you were going to present the recommended policy revision.
I'm going to speak for Mr. Frazier this evening on
Okay.
this. So as you know, we often buy services, items in bulk. And so currently in our policy, tonight is just a first read of this recommendation. You will see this again at our late September meeting to vote on this. But Mr. Frazier is recommending that we change, the state has since allowed us to do this change, but changing the threshold of when we are required to get 3 quotes from $2,500 to $5,000. The reason for that is many times we have supplies or book orders that fall right within that window. Well, that's a lot of resources and time spent of our team when we have to find 3 vendors with the same set of books. And so now that the state is allowing for this $5,000 threshold, we're just recommending that we as a district make this change.
I look at it, seems very reasonable to me. I don't know how anybody else feels, but given the size of the district, I mean, that's,
Mrs. Blevins, I did have a chance to speak to Mr. Frazier about this, and he
Yes.
explained to me that this policy's been the same since 2007.
It has.
And I think he also explained that the main reason to do this is simply just an adjustment for inflation.
It is, yes.
That's what he told me.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, he said, think goods cost more, the dollars are not going as far, so it's requiring more labor on our end to
Yep.
get the same goods. And so he just asked that we share that he would like to recommend to make this change. So if no one has any questions, we will put it on the next agenda for a vote.
any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay.
Next on the agenda is the board policy in regard to reimbursement of expenses. Only reason it's on here is just a reminder that I believe we talked about a little bit about some conferences or whatever, that if we as board members want to go, it has to be voted by the board in order for us to go. It's
for
just a reminder.
clarification, because Jeremy had sent out about going to Capitol Conference. And I told him I'll probably go, but I'm going to go at my own expense, so I don't need the board approval for that. That's
No,
just for reimbursement.
right. Yes, that's correct. But you have to do, I believe, my understanding is you have to make all the arrangements yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, yeah, you don't need approval
no.
for that. I just wanted, that was really what the clarification was. Yeah.
Yeah, if a board member is choosing to fund their own way, then there is no board action that is needed.
Yeah.
It's only if they're asking the district to cover the
Right.
reimbursement costs.
Any other questions on that?
Well, yes, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Are any of the other board members interested in going to Capitol Conference, or Mrs. Blevins, any of the administrators going?
I know that myself, Mr. Holbrook, Mr. Wright, and Mr. Frazier do plan on attending at least some part of that based on the agendas. We get great value out of there. The sessions are wonderful, and it allows us to kind of split up and bring back the knowledge to each other.
Yeah.
So we do plan to attend, yes.
When does the conference, I mean, I know the date is November the 10th, but does it actually start on Sunday, or is that a travel day?
Sunday is just kind of a light welcome. It's not the official. The kickoff is on that Monday.
Yeah,
I've been to it before.
Yeah.
yeah.
And back when we were doing the new buildings.
I remember you
that
talking
was-
about this.
That was so instrumental. I mean, it was so great. We learned so much up there. In fact, when we're trying to use the previous levy to be our portion towards state funding, we were talking to state representatives up there and working on different agencies up there. So it's great. I encourage every board meeting or member to go because you'll learn a lot up there.
There's a lot of, it's a large demographic from everyone from board members to state legislators to districts are sharing knowledge and presenting. I find great value in it, and I think it's a great experience for any board member if they're able to attend.
Well, if we have a board member that wants to go at the district's expense, is that something that's voted on by the board?
Yes, so we would have to put that on an agenda item for discussion, and then the board would vote. That's where the policy is, that's actually attached to our agenda here. The board member would still have to pay their costs, and then they're reimbursed by the board.
Yeah.
But we did attach that, and if that's something, Dr. Kopus, anyone is interested in, you just let President Baker know, we can put that on a future board agenda.
Any other questions? Okay, as I thought, it's going to be a quick meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, September 26th, beginning at 4 PM. That will be a regular business meeting. So I need a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
Well, Rich, I just